I don't know if you guys knew this, but I'm a Bollywood virgin. Yeah. Well, I had to tell you guys. I haven't seen that many, but after this year I've seen a few Bollywood movies and I'm getting a taste for them. This week Dan made us consult a doctor. And this was our first screening of Munna Bhai M.B.B.S. And it was fine. It wasn't my favorite. It was a story about a man pretending to be a doctor to please his parents. And they show up and watch him basically run a sham hospital, which is entertaining to watch. And then he's exposed as being a fraud, and in his deep shame tries to actually become a doctor. And along the way, we have some real heartwarming moments. We have some hijinks, and I don't know. It felt like an older, like a '90s comedy movie in America, and I found it a little predictable. That's where I'll draw the line here. Roland, what did you think?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely getting those same vibes. It was cute. I liked it. There were some funny moments, you know. And then every once in a while they would just like go crazy with it, and I'd be like, okay, I see you, Bollywood, and I appreciate you. Um, how I will say this. Usually with the songs, I skip them because I've never been really much of a musical guy. Just gonna be totally honest. When he is trying to comfort that kid that's trying to kill himself, spoilers. Um, that song I would like kind of listen to, and then like he's talking about like, and Sarah, I don't remember the name of the actual person.
Yeah.
And talking about how he loved her and blah blah blah. And then he was talking about like heartbreak and all this stuff like that. And the kid was like, "What'd you do next?" Well, then Karen. That was funny. I like that. That was a good little bit. There was a there was some cuteness and some heart moments.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
it, the movie has heart. These Bollywood movies all have heart, which is really nice and refreshing to a cynical American like me, and it's refreshing. The entire time I was watching this, I was like, this feels very familiar. Not in terms of plot, but I was like, what does this feel like? In the look and in the writing and in the attitudes. And what I finally decided, and you tell me if you agree here, this felt like an early Adam Sandler movie to me. It felt like
Interesting.
it felt like Billy Madison.
Interesting.
It felt like Billy Madison. It's like the that whole story of a rich kid who's just sort of like throwing his life away, and he has to go back through school, and he has some heartwarming moments, and he has some really ridiculous hijinks ensue as well. And there's something similar in this where this guy who's been pretending to be a doctor goes back to a medical college and tries to prove himself and teaches his teacher something along the way, and with Adam Sandler, like, it's an Adam Sandler movie, so it's really goofy and really raunchy in some points, but that's what this movie. I was watching it the whole time. I was like, I feel like I'm watching Billy Madison with different actors in a different language.
Yeah. Dan, what do you think of our takes so far? I'm seeing some faces, but I want to hear your voice.
Yeah, no, this is not what I thought you guys would say. It's definitely, I think I come at it from a very biased standpoint because this movie, I believe it came out in like 2003. So
Yeah.
Okay.
I was probably like around 8 years old at most when the movie came out. And so I've, been a fan of it since. And without telling you how old I am exactly, that's basically like 2 decades of me watching this movie and enjoying it. And the director Rajkumar Hirani, who made the movie, and then the producer of the video Vinod Chopra, like I think is his movie company, like something Chopra Productions, that you saw the logo of at the beginning. And the two of them, the producer director, they're sort of like a working duo. Like they do a lot of stuff together. One produces, one directs. This was like their first big collaboration, and it kind of like put them on the map. And
Hmm.
this was a movie that was a mainstream Bollywood film. It wasn't like an indie level kind of a thing. You have, A-list cast members here. You have Sanjay Dutt on the left, his father Sunil Dutt on the right, who, by the way, Sunil Dutt, the father of Sanjay Dutt, passed away after this movie came out, or I think maybe even before the movie came out. So this ended up being his last on-screen role, and he was a legendary actor, like in the business and in Bollywood for a long time. And his son, like Sanjay Dutt, has been going through a lot of like you know, rough, basically a rough patch, if you want to call it, more than that even, because not too long after this movie and a sequel to this was made, he got jailed in India for several years for trumped up weapons possession charges. And there's like, because he was into politics over there, and politics in India and the subcontinent in general can get really messy. And so there's actually a biopic that they made about him called Sanju, the actor Sanjay Dutt, that kind of also has a parts of this movie that are reenacted. So I'm giving you some background, but the point is, I have watched this movie so many times at this point, and it's not like I grew to love it. I loved it the first time I watched it. This thing was a
Yeah.
absolute phenomenon, like a cultural phenomenon. People were making parodies of it. People were trying to copy it. It was a movie that, for mainstream Bollywood movies at the time in the early 2000s, a lot of them were just glamour and they weren't really good on story. There were very few movies that had something really important or poignant to say. This movie, on the other hand, has, this very specific message of the way our medical system in India works. It's kind of broken. The wrong things are getting priority. Like, like they kind of show you like this guy's dying on a stretcher, and they still
Yeah.
make you line up and fill out a form before they'll admit you into the emergency room and take, stop you from dying. Like
Yeah.
those are the kind of things which, again, to an American audience, like seems like strange, but again, you have to kind of have the context of what the movie's trying to critique, and it's not America, it's like the culture, or at least at the time when this movie came out. I don't know how much has changed since, but like how the medical system worked in India. So, and that in addition to then when he goes to college, the medical school, and how they function, just like you immediately, what I liked about this movie is it both did not pull its punches. It didn't get too, for me, it didn't get too corny, and maybe again, I'm watching so many times, some of the corny stuff doesn't really hit me the same way anymore. But right from the beginning, you have the dean of the college, who's got this one philosophy of, I don't love my patients. A patient is just a diseased body that I have to treat. Versus,
Yeah.
Munna Bhai, like Murali Prasad Sharma, he's like, love and care can go a long way and could be just as good as any medical treatment you can provide.
It's a
And
wonderful
you
message.
kind of these
Yeah.
dipoles. It's from the beginning, and then like I'm just like, fundamentally from a writing standpoint, that was just fantastic, because right there's an inherent conflict of ideology, and that powers this entire movie. So I love that
Yeah.
about this film.
And it was I think because it's set up so well, you can sort of see all of the dominoes lined up from the beginning. And that's
Yeah.
what I mean by it's predictable. And that didn't take away from the experience. It was still touching and smart and funny and surprising in some moments.
Yeah.
But
I love this scene
in
where
yeah.
because the whole joke is like, he's like, yeah, I don't want to marry your daughter anymore, so you're a good guy. Then he tells her like the person who he is, and who's the lucky girl, he asks the dean, and he's like, oh, Dr. Suman, and I love the moment, because it's like, because of course that is actually his yeah. So
Right.
if you
Yeah.
watch the movie, it's hilarious, because then that laughter therapy thing, that was a great little like character thing that they did with Bowen Irani's character on the left there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like
And
that.
watching
Yeah.
this, one, to compare it to an Adam Sandler movie, I could absolutely see an American remake of something like this. It feels like a very American type of story, where the character is relatable. And one of the best scenes for me, it wasn't the most touching scene, but it's the scene that sort of sets up the entire premise of the movie, which is where he gets called out as a fraud. You know, they captured that beautifully, and for all of the pageantry and corniness of a Bollywood, you know, production, that really struck me as real. And that's not a moment you see a whole lot. You know, if somebody gets called out as a fraud, even in American movies, it's either like a big dramatic thing in front of all the people in the town or whatever, or it's played off as a joke, you know. But
And it's usually at the end. This was like very beginning.
and the thing is, like, they captured the feeling of shame so authentically that I felt shame in that moment watching it, and I thought that's good filmmaking.
To me,
So-
and that, like you said, and you can continue your point after this, but I just wanted to briefly point out, to me, like, if that scene wasn't as effective as it was, the rest of the movie wouldn't work. Because the
Exactly.
whole movie is built around, you start this guy's on the top of the world doing everything. He's got this parents fooled. It's all down to a science at this point. They show up, they
Yeah.
convert the whole town into an hospital. But then they tear that man down to the bones, like
Yeah.
literally to the bones. It's so early to build them back up throughout the rest of the movie. It's
Yeah.
it's
And
brilliant.
you know, I would even go so far as to say American movies don't really feature real shame. We don't have shame, and I think that's what was so refreshing about this, is that shame and negative feelings, like movies, they'll make you feel sad or they'll make you feel pity for somebody, but to really feel something, a human emotion, that goes beyond, like, because he cares about his family, it turns out, as much as he's been trying to fool the town and his parents and all this stuff. He can't run from the truth, and he can't run from this deeper feeling of inadequacy that he actually has to make a change in his life. So much, you know, I think that maybe the closest we got to that is something like Better Call Saul, where he realizes he's a little bit of a joke, and everybody sees him as a joke, and he's not living the life he wants, and so he has to reinvent himself and turn his life around because he feels this deep and profound human inadequacy. And we don't see that in movies all the time. We usually just kind of like the guy, or, oh, he's a lovable loser, so, you know. This takes the lovable out of it, and he has to earn the lovable.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, the circuit character in the movie, he's got this whole knife flipping thing that he does all the time. That became like a psychotic thing. Like my younger brother is like still trying to, like, he's like, I want to do what he does with the pocket knife because it's so cool, though, without like cutting yourself.
Yeah.
A butterfly knife it's tricky to do, but
Right?
it's
Yeah, exactly. It's not, I mean, you could do some damage if you don't do it right. Like, it's like, and the way they talk in this movie, I know, because this is something probably lost in translation, but the way they're talking in Hindi, there's this street mafia kind of an accent of Hindi that they use. They kind of point it out throughout the movie, like when one time the dean calls out the janitor on the office, he's like, mind your language, what are you saying? Like, you know, because the way they kind of talk is it's considered this very low class way of talking, and it's not very formal, whereas they're like, you know, you work at a hospital, like, so that, again, they do virtually everything they possibly can to put Bowman Irani's character, which was, I'm forgetting his name, the dean of the college, with Munna Bhai on the other side, and then like how different they are. What I most take away from this movie every time, however, is you know, like I said at the beginning of the movie, they break this man down to his bones, because ultimately everything that he's been doing up until that point in the story, it's to satisfy his parents and their expectations of him. And he says, like, I was scared, so I lied to you, and, you know, but the intention was good. But then the best moment, again, with the context being that he himself, Sanjay Dutt, had gone through a really, really terrible time in the years leading up to this movie. His career was also in a dumpster because he was getting terrible roles after terrible roles. So he wasn't landing any good roles in movies either. And his personal life was, you know, all over the place. And his father convinced him to take on this movie from a director that was basically unknown. And then he played a role in this movie. And then there's this like huge cathartic moment at the end where they hug and stuff. And if you have the context of what, you know, real life, everything that was happening around the time this movie was being made and the years since, and watching that scene, not only just the story itself, but it makes it so, like, I cried watching this movie, not gonna lie, and like shed a few tears, and because I was like, I'm gonna watch this movie and fully take it in, because it's been, like, I realized, like 3 or 4 years since I watched the movie, and it still gets me to this day. And then of course Daniyal had passed away not too long after this movie came out. So I bet you, like Sanjay, that probably looks back at this movie very fondly, and with a certain sense of tragedy as well, because it was like the last time he worked on something with his dad.
I mean, that's a wonderful shot to have cinematically, and I think to have done the movie because his dad advised him to work on it with him, to have that full arc as a character and to be going through that, to end on that, and to have this professionally produced shot of you hugging your father in this alternate reality is such a spiritually moving thing. And yeah, I was it my favorite thing that you've introduced us to? No, but I see the value in it, and I was touched by it, and more and more I am enjoying these deviations into the Bollywood.
Yeah.
The
world.
magic hug, the Jadoo Ki Chappi, like that too became, it's still to this day. You go to anybody in India and you're like, you mention to them Jadoo Ki Chappi or a magical hug or magical hug, they'd be like, they know immediately what you're talking about. It is
That's
iconic, like it's weaved into the fabric of like Indian cinema culture. So. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and like I said, there is a sequel to this movie that they made, which wasn't really, so the second movie is called Lage Raho Munna Bhai, which basically means keep it up, Munna Bhai. And the way they approached the story was they made it a few years later, and it wasn't a direct sequel in the sense they didn't continue this story. They just said like that these two main characters, Munna Bhai and Circuit, his like sidekick, the two of them are there. But everything else, they brought some of the actors back playing new characters, and it was like a new premise almost. Like they're still like the same. They're still like these hoodlums almost, but then they're put in a totally different situation. And in that world of the story of that movie, this story never happened. So it's like an anthology in that sense. They were gonna do a third one where they would go to America, they would go to the US, Munna Bhai and Circuit, and they even made like a promotional video, like an ad for like a teaser. But then he got jailed for a few years, and some, Sanjay never got a chance to make it. And then years, like I think it was like 3 or 5 years later, then he finally got released. They made that. He's been doing other stuff. I mean, now he's much older. If you see in a recent picture of him, but. No, this is one of those movies that it's considered a classic from its time, and people still remember it fondly, and I think new audiences still finding it. So, I liked
Absolutely.
it. I hope you guys had a good time.
Yeah,
I like
and
the
if you-
catchphrase that he had. That was awesome. Oh gosh, what was it? What was it? The no pressure.
The tension nahi lene ka mamu, like he's like no tension is what the
Yeah.
subtitles probably said. It's
Yeah.
like like don't worry, no tension. Mamu is like uncle, basically. Mamu is like
Yeah.
the translation of that is Mamu would be your mother's brother. So you would call him uncle in English. I think in English you just have uncle could be any number of those relationships. Where in Hindi, like Mamu, Chachu, like they're all depending on if it's your mother's brother or your dad's brother. Like there's different names for those relationships. So that's where that comes from.
All right.
That was hilarious. I
Well,
liked it.
if you're enjoying watching us react to these Bollywood classics, subscribe, share, talk to us about it, make your own suggestions, because it's a real trip for people who aren't super familiar with it to watch these things. But thank you for watching. Thank you for liking and subscribing and commenting. Join us. We're back every week talking about all the stuff.